Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Teacher Lisa, your ESL video instructor. Today we're going to talk about 10 key points to remember about what interviewers can and can't do in the United States. So I want to make sure you're fully prepared when you have your first interview, whether it's by video conference or in person. You should know some of the things that are legal and illegal to ask and do on an interview. Let's get to it. Well, let's talk about interviewer don'ts. So when we say interviewer, that's the person that's representing the company and interviewing you, the interviewee. So let's talk about the applicant's protected information. You would be the applicant. So let's discuss discriminatory questions. Now, these are some things that even people living in the United States currently aren't always clear about, or they don't even know about. So I'm talking about what is illegal to ask during an interview. So here are some of the things, and we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. So you cannot make inquiries about race. So you're not allowed to ask someone, hey, are you from Afghanistan? Hey, are you from Israel? Hey, are you from Brazil? Or directly asking, what's your race? It's illegal. You can also not ask about their religion. Are you Jewish? Are you Christian? It's illegal. Their national origin, their sex, including pregnancy. So you cannot ask a woman, are you going to get pregnant soon? Do you have kids? Will you get pregnant in the next 6 months? It's illegal. And also age. You cannot ask on an interview, how old are you? Obviously, if somebody looks like they're 13, then you might ask that. But you cannot ask how old they are because it can be perceived as discrimination. Obviously, if the position requires that you be a certain age, because it might be something that's very physical, then that's a little bit different. That, of course, would be clear in the qualifications, but you cannot just ask this question because you want to know. So once you're hired, of course, date of birth will be used for the paperwork. So we are talking about on the interview. You cannot, in the United States, legally ask someone their age. You cannot also make inquiries about their disability. Even if the person rolls up in a wheelchair, you're not allowed to say, hey, why are you in a wheelchair? Hey, what's your disability? Marital status, you cannot ask someone if they're married or single or dating. It's illegal. Or their genetic information. Again, it's illegal. So you might be wondering, there's a lot that they can't ask on a personal level. It's also up to you if you want to disclose that. So if the interviewer is really asking because they're interested that you have an accent and they might ask, hey, where are you from? What's your origin? And you perceive that they're just trying to be friendly or they're really interested in where you're from and you feel comfortable answering, you can. So, again, if you see perhaps a picture of the interviewer's family on the desk, and maybe they have twins, you might say something like, oh, wow, I have twins too. I have two twin boys. And you start talking about children and your kids. Again, that's different if it's something you brought up or something you don't mind talking about. But the interviewer cannot directly ask you about the things listed here because it's discriminatory. You might be surprised that salary history is also illegal. Many states restrict asking about past earnings. They need to focus on the offered position salary instead. So they cannot ask you directly, how much did you make at XYZ company? Or how much are you making now? If that's something you want to disclose or reveal, that's certainly up to you. But in the United States, again, it's state by state, but many states have this restriction that you cannot ask the person you're interviewing how much money they made at this company, at that company, how much you make now. Next, let's talk about interviewer don'ts, unequal treatment, but specifically in regards to the position itself. Well, what do we mean? Well, let's look at a couple areas. So, on an interview, you can't be asked unrelated questions. Don't ask questions that don't assess skills or qualifications for the job. So, you as an ESL student, you might have a position in a company that puts you in charge of hiring, or you have to hire someone from your team. So, when we think of interviews, we often think of being on the other side, the one wanting the job. But maybe you already have a job and you're moving to the US and now you're in charge of hiring, or you have a new responsibility and you have to speak English. You have to remember that you have to be fair. You can't ask questions that are outside the scope or the qualifications of the job. So if the question is unrelated, has nothing to do with the job, maybe they start to ask personal questions, be careful. Regarding social media, it's generally illegal to ask for personal social media logins. That might seem like common sense, don't share your logins, but you'll be surprised people share logins all the time. So again, it's illegal for the company to ask that. Which leads me to the next point, be careful what you have on your social media profiles if they are public. Anyone can access them. Next up, interviewer dues. So this is positive, things that the interviewer should be doing. So again, if it's something that you're going to be doing in charge of interviews and you have to do it in English, this could be helpful for you. So job-related inquiries. So when it comes to skills and experience, you really have to focus on the applicant's ability to do the job. Ask about education, prior experience, and how they handled work situations. But it has to be related to the job that they're applying for. So you cannot ask questions outside the scope of their skills and experience that isn't related to the job. So you have to be very narrow in your questioning. If you start talking about skills that they don't need for the job or experience that is not related to the job, now you're going outside of the scope. It is okay to ask about availability, work schedule, flexibility, potential conflicts, but be careful how you ask. You cannot ask a woman, for example, your shift, if I hire you, your shift is going to start at 8 a.m. Do you have kids that you have to take to school in the morning? Will it be a problem for you starting at 8 a.m.? So, what's wrong with that question? Not about asking about potential conflicts or if she can be flexible enough or if 8 a.m. is a good start time. The problem is that he asked about her kids. So by asking, do you have to pick up kids? The interviewer is being illegal. Cannot ask directly or even indirectly if you have children. Do you have kids to pick up at school? So you have to be very careful if you are the interviewer and if you are the interviewee, being aware of your rights. I'll talk a little bit in a bit about what to do if you are in a situation where you're asked something that's illegal. Next, interviewer dues, general practices. So, what are some good things you should be doing if you're in the interviewer's position, and also what to look for when you know this interview is going well? You can look for these general practices and, of course, learn to expect these things. So, standardized questions. Ask all applicants similar questions to ensure a fair comparison. So there are standardized questions that get asked on an interview. I will make some future videos about how to handle some of those questions. I do have one already that I did in the past, how to answer some interview questions, some common questions. But as the interviewer, you have to make sure you're asking everybody the same question. So if the person you're interviewing is in a wheelchair, it should be the same question that you ask somebody who's not in a wheelchair, to be fair. There should always be clear job descriptions, and you want to ensure the description, of course, is accurate and it does reflect the position's requirements. So that is just best practice. Of course, you should be professional on the interview. So if you're the one being interviewed, maintain a professional and courteous demeanor throughout the interview. And of course, if you're representing the company, you should also be professional. If you find yourself in an interview where you find the interviewer is not being professional, it might tell you something about the company. It can tell you something about the hiring process or the hiring manager, how the company does things, how professional they are. So I know we focus very much on answering questions on the interview, but also you should be looking for professionalism, and also the next one, accommodation request. Provide reasonable accommodations for applicants with disabilities who request them. So if you are someone who has a disability, I just use the example if you're in a wheelchair, there are other disabilities too, of course. That's just one of them. We also could have disabilities that the interviewer doesn't see. So if you make a request, by law, if it's reasonable, they are supposed to grant that request. So remember, all of these points I discussed today are general guidelines. There are specific laws that do vary state by state. So if you want more information, what's on record, go to the EEOC, which stands for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You'll get all the latest information. So there is the link. But it's a good idea to know what to expect on an interview in the United States. Of course, I'll have more videos on this process coming up in the future. I wanted to touch on the point that I mentioned earlier. Well, what do you do if you're asked a question that's illegal? You can go ahead and answer it if you feel comfortable and it doesn't bother you and you want to answer it anyway, then sure, go right ahead. If it makes you really uncomfortable, perhaps they start talking about the country you're from. Maybe they can hear from the accent that you're Brazilian, or hear from the accent that you're from Iran or some other country, and they're really making you feel uncomfortable. Then you can say that I don't feel comfortable answering this question. I wouldn't be so strong as to say that's illegal, but you might try to answer it a different way. Maybe you can, we call it skirt around the question. So answering something, giving them something, but not being so direct. So, for example, if they ask a woman, are you expecting to have a baby anytime soon? You don't really want to answer that. You can say something like, I don't know what the future holds, and then just move on from there. So you're not really saying what your plans are. You're almost saying, I don't know. But you can do things, of course, on the interview to lessen the discomfort. And if it gets really uncomfortable, then maybe this isn't the company for you. If you're so uncomfortable, if they continuously ask questions that they shouldn't, what's your age, where are you from, what's your religion? If they're asking a lot of these personal questions, then maybe it's not for you. So again, go ahead and answer, even if you know it's illegal, or give them a half answer, or you can directly say, I'm not really comfortable answering that, or I don't know how to answer that. That's perfectly fine. And I did want to mention, I do have this guide that I put together. It is free. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Finding Employment in the United States for ESL Learners. I'll link it in the description. It'll link you to my Gumroad store. You can certainly uh, leave a tip if you'd like, but it's completely free. It will not ask you for payment at checkout, but it walks you through the process of finding employment, what's needed. There's a chapter on visas. So if you have no idea about how the hiring process works in the United States, then this could be a good guide for you, or you just want to know where to get started or what are some resources, then you can go ahead and click the link in the description. See you in the next video.